a lot of people experience back pain, but there's different types of back pain. And last time I talked about the QL, the quadratus lumborum, but this time I want to talk about the psoas. So if you sit a lot, or if you ride your bike a lot, if you're ever like in this position a lot, you'll notice that there's a muscle right here that goes on top that just kind of stays in that constant state of shortening. And what happens is then we might go out for a run and then wonder why our back hurts. So this is a short way for you to first understand where the psoas is. And also we're going to give you just a couple ways of just kind of releasing it a little bit and then doing some stretch. So if you actually feel on your back, now obviously when I actually hurt my, when I had oh God, I can't even think straight. When I actually had a herniated disc, I actually couldn't balance on my sits bones. But you can actually feel the psoas working if you kind of lean back a little bit and then pick up your feet. You can actually do this with your hands behind you like this and try to pick up your feet. You're going to feel your core, but also what happens is as you flex your hips, one of the hip flexors is your psoas, and it's going to be just kind of right there at the top of your hip. You can actually feel it engaging. Just kind of dig in really, really closely, just at the top of your hip. It's not your quads, but just a little inside there. So one thing that you'll need to do is you need to strengthen that. So obviously, if you want to do some standing poses and then you think about standing upright, I won't do it right now, but standing upright and feel that pushing back, because it's going to engage your core, but it's also going to strengthen your psoas. But let's talk about releasing right now. And if you have a foam roller, that might be really, really good for you. But I have a grid from days of yore. And it also, if you have if just one of those, what do they call it? What do they have? Cobra, what do they have? What do they call those? The things you have in the pool. A noodle. You got a noodle work good. So what happens lots of times is we might go into a Cobra pose and say we're going into a yoga class. And right now, this right here puts a little bit of strain on my lower back. Why? Because I have a lot of lordosis going on right now. And lordosis is the curvature of your spine. And the psoas is actually important for that, because what happens is when you have this shortening right here, so as you have this little bit of engagement here, it actually causes the pelvis to move a little bit forward, and then it causes a little bit of, there's other muscles involved here, but anyway, it causes a little bit of that curvature in your spine. But that's good. But then, of course, you also have some stretching of the hamstrings going on, some other things that are going on that's going to be a constant state of tension. But so what happens sometimes is if this is too strained right now, then if you come onto your belly, what happens sometimes is we'll ask, maybe we'll go to a yoga class and we'll do a Cobra, and we're like, oh yeah, Cobra, this is just great, and it sucks. And then we'll use our arms to push up. Oh yeah, I'm doing yoga. This is just great. But just look at my pelvis right now. So right now, I'm just jarring too much into my lower back. So what you'll need to do in some of these back bends is you'll want to take the top of the pelvis and just kind of tilt it back. So what happens is, so lots of times in Cobra, we'll actually tilt the pelvis a little bit forward because our hips are tight. What we want to do is we want to strengthen them a little bit and reduce some of the tension in our lumbar spine. And so what happens is in our attempt to do any sort of back bends, we put too much into our lumbar spine and don't do enough of our stretching. So again, sometimes what happens with me is I'll feel a cobra pose, or even if I'm lying on my back, like lying on my back just like this is actually not good for me right now. So what I need to do is I need to kind of reduce some of the tension and work to tilting my pelvis a little bit backwards and stretching the psoas a little bit. So let's find ourselves into a cobra, but this is what they call baby cobra. So rather than think about a cobra where you're pushing off with your hands, you'll want to think about not using your hands at all and try to push the tops of your thighs in, and you're going to feel your butt contract. And that's not great either. So now I'm going to inch my thighs back a little bit. So let's see what happens if we take our foam roller and put it at the top of our hips, okay? And let's just feel what it feels like to rest our foam roller at the top of our hips. Now I'm feeling a little bit of tension in some of the areas that the psoas. There's also a little bit of TFL release right there. And lots of times when we do foam rolling, we'll do a little bit too much movement. And why not just kind of hang out and let the release happen? And what happens sometimes is that your breathing will actually help in the release as well, especially with your tissues. That's why in yin yoga, you allow really deep breathing. It actually facilitates. If you're not breathing deep, then you're doing it wrong. Because what happens is as you inhale and exhale, it actually does the stretching as you inhale and exhale. So this might actually feel really, really good for you. And you actually can feel some of the tense areas. But what we want to feel is a little bit of a tilt backwards at the top of the pelvis. And then, you can move it up just a scotch. And what that's doing is it's helping some of the iliopsoas feel a little bit of release, a little bit of tension release. And if you want, you can use your little toes to move forward, but that's not actually going to get to it too much. And then if you have the myofascial balls, you can place those at the top where your psoas is. So it's basically kind of at the top of your thighs, a little bit on the inside. There's a couple muscles right there, right at the crease. And if you can find some of the tense areas, and remember, if you were doing that modified boat pose, you'll remember where you were feeling the hips flex. And see if you can if you actually have to sit up and turn around and do boat pose again, or that modified boat pose, go ahead and do it. And then come back down and place the myofascial balls there. If you don't have those, you can actually place your fists there. And that actually might feel good as well. You can place your fists this way. And then if this is the case, then you can float your feet a little bit. So if you take yoga, you'll notice that this looks a little bit like locust pose. So I'm going to place my balls in there a little bit again. So a little bit of myofascial release is really, really good if you want to do some stretching. And then also, if you notice that your butt cheeks are engaged too much, your butt cheeks are going to do a lot of work, but sometimes they can engage too much and allow your psoas to just kind of take a couple of days off, which isn't good. There you go now. So then we'll move on to a little bit of stretching. Now there's a couple of different stretches you can do. You can do sort of lunges, and I've mentioned those in another video. You can go to my cycling video. But I want to focus on some of those back bends we were doing before. And when you see, oh good God, sometimes you see a yoga video that says yoga for back bends, and then you see somebody doing something like this. And I'm like, really? We don't expect to do any of that stuff, and that's just not human. So when you consider back bends, doing some of those things that we were just doing will actually help. But it's really not necessary. If you actually notice what a back bend is, it really should be a matter of opening the psoas as well, so you're not just drawing so much into your lower back. So if you weren't doing locust before, so lots of times we do locust pose and we'll send it into the lower back. So of course, come onto your belly and then just kind of inch your hips a little bit further back. Now for me, this actually feels much better than it did before, and hopefully it does you, then you can yell at me. But so this actually should feel much better. So again, you want to think about the top of the pelvis lifting just a little bit. You're actually taking your pubic bone and driving it into your mat. And if you actually do that before you do anything else, you'll actually feel the top of your butt cheeks engage. See if you can relax that just a scotch. Just see if you can press the tops of the thighs into the mat and lift your belly and try to press your pubic bone into the mat. And that is going to engage a little bit of your core. And that's ultimately what you're feeling. And you might actually stay here. But if you actually go to a Bikram yoga class, or what they call it, hot yoga class, I absolutely hate it, but I actually realize why they do this. So if you do a traditional locust pose will look something like this. And lots of times what will happen is you'll feel that in your lower back if you're not thinking about engaging the core, moving the butt down a little bit, pressing the pubic bone into the mat and lifting up from there. And that way you're getting a little bit more of a core engagement and strengthening the back rather than crushing into it. But what happens in a different type of locust pose in hot yoga is that you are actually moving your arms underneath your body, and it sucks. Oh, I hate it. But if you think about trying to get your elbows underneath you, and this is really not comfortable for anybody, but what this does is if you can place at least your wrists or your arms to help the pelvis tilt backwards just a little bit, not too much. And then what happens is you extend your legs behind you. So zip your legs together. And then try to bring your chest up a little bit, and then your legs up a little bit. So this is a little bit of a strengthening and stretching, lengthening overall. And if you can think about a little bit of an internal rotation of your thighs, that'll help create some space in the lower back. Because what happens is the psoas wants to do an external rotation of your hips as well. So think about internally rotating your thighs. And then come on down. So then hopefully it gives a little bit more mobility into your lower back. Now, let's try a little bit of a back bend. And bridge pose, now I will show you right now. Bridge pose isn't my favorite either, but again, some of the best poses for you are the ones that you hate. It doesn't mean you avoid them, it means you do them with a little bit more awareness. Now, if you notice that bridge pose, again, lots of times we jar too much in the lower back without really thinking about how we do a little bit of a tilt backwards with the pelvis. So that way we're not dumping too much in the lower back. So I can go like this and really strain my lower back, or I can take the top of my pelvis and tilt it back just maybe like a millimeter. And now I'm feeling a little more of engagement in a little bit of stretch in my psoas, and a little bit of engagement in my butt, a little bit, not too much. So that's one type of a bridge, but a little bit more restorative bridge, which might help, will be one with a block. So this is where we're going to feel both engagement and stretch at the same time. So I have a little, I think this is a 3-inch high block, and that might be fine. If you have a blanket, you can also do this with your hands underneath your thighs, your butt. So if you, this can be your back bend, and if that's your back bend, that's fine too. I've actually done Shavasana with my hands back like this. But if you have a block or maybe a book, Encyclopedia Britannica, because, they're so useful now. Use them for yoga. So this is a little bit more restorative bridge. And you can move it up a little bit, but why not just make it a little bit more restorative and then make this into a back bend? So again, think about a little bit more of a tilt in the pelvis. So the top of the pelvis tilts back just a little bit. So the sacrum is on top of the block, and maybe the top of the hips is just maybe a hair off of it. And this will stretch your psoas, give a little bit of a back bend, and you'll feel it there. So you can stay here, but then you can place your hands on top of your thighs. And then you can feel the engagement of your psoas. It's just, you'll feel it engage, and then you'll feel it relax. And then engage. So that right there is your psoas. And so you can keep with that engagement, or you could just hang out in the more restorative posture. So again, you want to make it very, very comfortable for you. And Kona's going to bring me a toy. Hi, girl. she is. And then you can pet your puppy. So if you can get a feel for the tightness on the top here, and my guess is that it's probably tight here if you're a runner, if you're a cyclist, or if you sit a lot. So maybe spend a little bit of time doing this restorative, but also remember to engage, work on strengthening the psoas, just like you would strengthen other muscles. And I'm going to let my dog out because that's her way of letting me know she wants some attention. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit more awareness of maybe with some of your back issues. It could be the QL, it could be the psoas, it could be tight hamstrings, it could be compression. So we'll work on the different types of compression, how to release some of the compression, then we'll also work on the TVA for next time. So hopefully everything is okay with you, and talk to you soon.